The sun was relentless, baking the very air we breathed. We were the children of Israel, wandering the desert of sin, feeling lost and forgotten. Every step kicked up dust that coated our tongues and stung our eyes. We had left Egypt behind, chasing a promise, but here only sweat flowed. The last of our water was gone. Thirst settled over us all, a thirst for hope as much as water. The silence turned to anxious murmurs. Desperation was etched on every face. Mothers clutched their children, lips cracked and dry. The elderly slumped in the meager shade, drained by the heat. We had seen miracles. Bread from heaven, the Red Sea parted, but suffering drowns out memory. Our journey slowed to a crawl. The excitement of freedom was replaced by the gritty reality of survival. Even the animals suffered. The promise of freedom felt like a cruel mirage. The camp at Rephidim, meant for rest, became a place of torment. There was no water, not a drop. Tension thickened the air. We were a people on the edge, looking for someone to blame. Our eyes, filled with fear and resentment, turned toward one man, Moses.
It started with whispers. Did Moses really hear from God? Why lead us here to die of thirst? Fear and desperation watered these doubts, and soon, complaints echoed through the camp. The respect for Moses crumbled. He was no longer our deliverer, but the source of our suffering. The grumbling became a roar. A crowd formed, faces hard with anger. "Is this why you brought us out of Egypt, to kill us and our children with thirst?" one man shouted. The mob surged forward, united by complaint, forgetting God's power and focusing only on their need. The people were not just thirsty, they were testing God. "Is the Lord among us or not?" they demanded. Fear blinded us to faith. We shrank God down to the size of our problem. Moses stood alone before the angry crowd.
Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?
His words did little to calm them. Their thirst made them deaf to reason. The crowd pressed in, demands growing louder. They wanted water, and they wanted it now. Their desperation curdled into rage, and Moses stood in its path. The unity that once freed us now threatened to destroy our leader. Moses felt the crushing weight of their anger. He had given up everything to lead these people, but now stood alone, their trust replaced by resentment. He saw their suffering, their thirst, and his heart ached for them. He was frustrated by their lack of faith, exhausted by the cycle of miracle and complaint. The pressure was unbearable. They were on the verge of stoning him. Moses turned from the crowd, seeking solitude in the wilderness. He was caught between a complaining people and a holy God, a lonely mediator in a desolate land. He was just a man, overwhelmed by the task before him. The leadership he bore was not a crown, but a heavy cross. He needed help. He needed an answer. He needed God to show up, not just for the people, but for him.
Alone among the rocks, Moses let his guard down and cried out to God, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me."
This was not a formal prayer, but a desperate plea from an exhausted leader. Moses admitted his powerlessness, opening the door for God's power. It took courage for Moses to be so vulnerable. He didn't pretend to have it all together. He ran to his source of strength. When overwhelmed, our first response should be to cry out to God. He can handle our frustration and doubt. In that desolate place, surrendering the problem to God began to lift the weight from Moses' shoulders. He placed the outcome in God's hands, pleading for intervention. It was a moment of profound trust, born out of desperation. Moses turned his face from the angry crowd to the problem solver. He waited, heart pounding, for an answer from the God who had called him. In the silence, hope began to stir. And God answered,
"Go on ahead of the people. Take some elders and the staff with which you struck the Nile."
God told Moses to step forward, re-establishing his leadership through action, not argument. The staff, a symbol of God's power, would now bring life, not judgment.
"I will stand before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out for the people to drink."
God himself would be present at the rock. Moses was not alone. The command was simple, but it required faith. Strike the rock. The solution was unimaginable, but God can bring life from the most barren places. The rock represented the people's hardened hearts and their impossible situation. By bringing water from stone, God showed he can provide in any circumstance. Moses' role was to trust and obey. The power was not in the staff, but in the God who stood with him. The moment of decision had come. With God's command in his heart, Moses returned, gathered the elders, and walked to the rock at Horeb. The camp watched, hope and skepticism mingling in their eyes. Moses felt God's presence. It was a holy moment, a showdown between doubt and divine power.
Moses lifted the staff and struck the rock.
For a moment, nothing happened. Then a trickle, a stream, a torrent of water gushed from the rock.
The elders gasped in awe.
The water poured out, forming a river that flowed toward the camp.
People ran, filling their jars, their anger washed away by relief and joy. Children danced, animals drank, and hope returned to Rephidim.
God had provided, answering grumbling with grace. He turned their greatest complaint into a source of life. The impossible had happened before their eyes. The God of the wilderness had made a way. After the miracle, Moses named the place Massah and Meribah, testing and quarreling so they would never forget. In their greatest doubt, God responded with grace, revealing himself as a faithful provider. The names were a reminder. Even when we are faithless, he remains faithful.
This story is more than history. It's a picture of our own relationship with God. We all find ourselves in spiritual deserts, questioning God's goodness. We forget his past faithfulness and focus on our present thirst.
But God meets us in our doubt. He provides not because we deserve it, but because he is good. The Apostle Paul wrote that the rock was Christ, struck so living water could flow for all. God's ultimate provision for our thirst was his own Son. This story foreshadows the gospel. God's solution is always more gracious than we imagine. Trust God, especially in the hard times. When your faith is weak, remember the water from the rock. Even when we doubt, he is our wellspring of faithfulness.